Great. I'll call the St. Paul City Council to order. Roll call.
Baker, Prince,
Here.
Tolbert, here. Yang, Ballinger,
Here.
Jalali,
Here.
Council President Brenmoen.
Here.
5 present, 2 absent, being Council Members Naker and Yang, and they are excused.
If you'd like, we invite you to stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda items 3 through 13 are before you for your consideration.
Is there anything that should be taken off consent this afternoon? Seeing none, Mr. Ballinger moves consent. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted. Item 14 is Resolution 23-1040, directing the Department of Safety and Inspections as to how to proceed with the request of licensee Majid Naitushun, doing business as MJ Market, to surrender the tobacco shop license for the premises located at 922 Thomas Avenue West.
All right, and this, as mentioned, was laid over on July 19th. I look to Mr. Ballinger for a resolution.
I'm going to go along with what the hearing officer had to say and revoke.
All right, so move with the revocation as per the hearing officer. Any discussion on that motion? All right, and seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted to revoke. Item 15 is final adoption of Ordinance 23-35, granting the application of NP 328 LLC to rezone the property at 898 Raymond Avenue from RM2 multiple family residential to T2 traditional neighborhood and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map.
There's a motion from Ms. Jalali to approve. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The ordinance is adopted.
Mr. Tolbert moves suspension of the rules. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
Staff report update on Minnesota House File 100 regarding cannabis.
All right, we have Mr. Peterson from the mayor's office, and I believe, and special guests. I'll leave it at that till you make your introduction. Welcome.
Great. Thanks, Council President Brenmoen and council members. Again, Eric Peterson, IGR with the mayor's office. For the projector, if I could have that magically work here. What I have handed out to all of you will be here on the dock as well. Let me know when you can see that.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So just walking through here what we know as of right now. So as of yesterday, August 1st, cannabis became legal in the state of Minnesota here. And this is for possession, use, manufacturing, and then the sale of cannabis products within the state is what the legislature passed. And it established the Office of Cannabis Management, which is OCM, which you'll see referred in this document throughout. And it was charged with enforcing an organized system of regulation for the cannabis industry here in Minnesota, along with the hemp consumer industry. So the law established labor standards for the use of cannabis and hemp products and for testing of employees and employers, and establishes the expungement procedures for certain individuals previously convicted of crimes related to cannabis. And so possession, use, and home growth under this new law, like I said, became legal yesterday, and legal sales are expected to begin in January of 2025. And so I put the website here on this document for cannabis.mn.gov, and that's where the state's website has been up and running here for a few months here. So folks, it's been getting updates, so check that out. I also listed here on this document what types of licenses the Office of Cannabis Management will be issuing. So you can see all those here on page 1. Flipping to page 2 here, the city requirements and regulations. So I put a lot of questions and answers in here just for you to follow and track here, but is our city required to adopt any new regulations under this new law currently? And the city is not required to adopt any new regulations under the new law. However, we will be required to register retail sellers and perform compliance checks once the OCM is up and running and has issued license. And as you see on this chart here that my guest here in a few minutes that you'll hear from the League of Minnesota Cities, Alex Hassel, who helped usher this bill through and was a big supporter and helped us with the cities here and getting this legislation through and getting a lot of good things for cities in this. And so you can see what a cannabis business applies for a license, and then going through the zoning and approval, which would come through the city and through PED and Department of Safety inspections. And then the city would issue the registrations to the certain cannabis businesses once they've received a license. And then this is where the city will conduct the compliance check once the business is up and running. And then as we get into it, the cities will collect registration fees and then part of the 10% tax, that's the revenue of the cannabis that's going to be sold. So can we require sellers to have a city issue license? A city is not required to have additional licenses other than the cannabis license issued by the Office of Cannabis Management. However, Office of Cannabis Management will forward applications to the cities for them to certify whether the proposed business complies with local zoning ordinances, and if applicable, whether the proposed business complies with state and fire building code. So the Office of Cannabis Management may not issue a license to a cannabis business that does not meet the local zoning and land use laws. So just for your tracking of that. In addition, upon receiving the application for the cannabis license, the Office of Cannabis Management will contact the city in which the business is looking to locate and provide the city with 30 days in which to provide input on the application. This will be the city's opportunity to provide the Office of Cannabis Management with any additional information it believes relevant to the decision on whether to issue a license, including identifying concerns about the proposed location of a business or sharing public information about the applicant. Before cannabis business begins making retail sales, it will be required to register with the city in which it is located. And moving on to page 3 of the documents, when is St. Paul required to issue retail registrations to cannabis retail businesses? And so we're required to issue a retail registration to a cannabis micro business with a retail operations endorsement, cannabis meso business with a retail operations endorsement, cannabis retailer, medical cannabis retailer, or low potency hemp edible retailer that has met the following requirements. They have a valid license through the Office of Cannabis Management. They paid the registration fee. They found to be in compliance with the requirements of the applicable state laws through a preliminary compliance check by the city, and is incurrent of all property taxes and assessment of the location where the retail establishment is going to be located. Can a retail registration issued by our city be transferred? A retail registration cannot be transferred. Are we required to conduct compliance checks on businesses with cannabis retail registrations? The answer is yes. The city will be required to conduct compliance checks on the retail cannabis businesses. Is there any city zoning regulation restrictions where a business can operate? And so listed here, cities may prohibit the operations of cannabis business, and I want to highlight this to the council here, is it cannot be within 1,000 feet of a school, 500 feet of a daycare or a residential treatment facility, or an attraction within a public park that is regularly used by minors, including like a playground or athletic field. So as I said yesterday, cannabis became legal. So without the businesses up and running, because the Office of Cannabis Management won't be issuing licenses until as of early, potentially January 2025, this is what individuals can have in their possession if they are over the age of 21. So you can have 2 ounces on your person in a public place. You may possess 2 pounds of cannabis in your personal residence. You can transport up to 8 grams or less of adult use cannabis concentrate. You can transport edible products infused with a total of 800 milligrams or less. You can give away the cannabis flower and products in an amount that is legal for a person to possess in public. Moving on to page 4, home growth of cannabis has been authorized as of yesterday, and so individuals can grow up to 8 cannabis plants, of which up to 4 may be mature flowering plants. Home growth of cannabis must be enclosed, locked space, and you cannot be able to see it from public view. Cannabis and products can and cannot be consumed. The law explicitly authorizes individuals to use adult cannabis flower and adult use cannabis products in 3 certain places. It's in a private residence, including the individual's curtilage or yard, on a private property not generally accessible by the public unless the owner of the property prohibits the use of the products, or on the premises of an establishment or event licensed to permit on-site consumption. So a person may not use cannabis flower, cannabis products, or hemp-derived products that involve Smoke, aerosol, or vapor at any location where smoking is prohibited under the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act. The law is silent, however, on whether cannabis can be smoked in public places other than governed by the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act. And so while the law doesn't specifically authorize the use of cannabis in public places, it does not create a penalty in a public place other than governed by the Minnesota Indoor Clean Act. So if the city would want to enforce a mechanism to prevent the use of cannabis in public places, it would need to adopt an updated ordinance prohibiting such use and make it a petty misdemeanor. The new law does not clearly define the type of locations that are considered not generally accessible to public in law, so therefore a city ordinance should clearly define those locations that you would want to identify. And the existing ordinance relating to smoking in public places may cover the city for these products. The city is now reviewing and has been reviewing over the past months our ordinances to determine if any changes are necessary on the smoking, but just wanted to flag that for you. And as I stated, sales is still illegal, so you can have it on your possession and be using the product, but without a license received by the Office of Cannabis Management, it is illegal to sell in the state of Minnesota unless you are on one of the 11 tribal lands. They are obviously exempt because of their tribal sovereign nation. And so I just wanted to highlight there of those products being sold. Moving on to page 5, I updated some of our current parks and recs and library policies. And so chapter 3 and section 4 of alcohol and tobacco for parks and recs policies is that it only identifies tobacco products, including e-cigarettes, that are prohibited in youth activity areas, including playing areas, athletic fields, spectator viewing areas, and parent supervision resting areas. And so this current rule could be updated for parks to include marijuana or to generalize the rule to all smoking if you'd like. Currently, the rule does not prohibit any cannabis because it is specific to tobacco, as I stated. The Minnesota Clean Indoor Act prohibits smoking indoor public places, public meetings, places of employment, and public transportation. This applies to cannabis and applies to all libraries and rec centers. There is no city ordinance prohibiting tobacco use on library properties outside of the buildings. So I give some examples there, like George Latimer Central Library with the courtyard outside there, the Hayden Heights parking lot, Rice Street parking lot, Riverview's like front and side yards. Those are, if you were outside of those libraries, you could still be using cannabis on those properties. And so other libraries that are owned by others, like Dayton's Bluff or Arlington, or by Metro States where they have a tobacco use ordinance for parks, those would be tobacco-free campuses. So as of right now, as I stated, the city does not have a no smoking in public places ordinance that would prohibit the smoking of cannabis in public places, like including parks, library property, sidewalks, et cetera, near buildings. And so if this change was wanted to be made by folks, the parks and libraries would involve recommendations from the Parks and Recs Commission and the Library Board prior to the action here by the City Council. Moving on to the bottom of page 5, amount of cannabis shops in St. Paul. So the bill authorizes local governments by ordinance to limit the number of cannabis shops that they can have by 12,500 residents for every shop. And a county can have an active registration for every 12,500 residents as well within that city. And it's not obligated to register any additional cannabis businesses on top of each other. So based on the 2020 census, St. Paul would be having the ability to have up to 25 eligible retail shops here, starting when the licensing begins in 2025.
Mr. Peterson, quick question on this tsunami of info. The quick question here, given that Ramsey County is densely populated, small county that overlays St. Paul, are you suggesting that the county, would they also have the same number of businesses within St. Paul's boundaries that are county licensed?
I'm going to defer to Ms. Hassel here just to see if she can just. You're asking if would they have 25 as well, or?
Yeah, are we talking 50 here? So if you could help clarify that. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks, Council President and members of the Council. My name is Alex Hassel. I am with the League of Minnesota Cities Intergovernmental Relations Team. So the way that the license limits are structured are that the limit would apply to both the city and the county. So your limit as St. Paul would be 1 per every 12,500. That would not be stacked on top of the county's limit. And then actually when Ramsey County does hit that limit, if they put that limit in place, once they reach that threshold of retailers, everyone within the county can actually stop issuing any additional retail registrations at that time, which could be actually lower than the limit that you set as a city as well. Is that a little bit more clear?
Not to me.
I'm confused.
So if Ramsey County got out of the gate and allowed 25 shops in St. Paul, we're out.
If your limit was met as a city, you would not be obligated to allow any more registrations within your city. Same goes for if the limit for the county as a whole is met. And so say more of those registrations went to other cities other than St. Paul within Ramsey County. If that county threshold was met, everyone else within the county could kind of hold firm at that line, and they wouldn't be obligated to issue anything on top of the county's limit. So the cities actually kind of can be benefited by the county limit if more retailers are issued outside of the city's jurisdictions and pull down from the limit that the county can issue.
Okay, Mr. Lawley?
Never mind. I'll just wait to process all this. This is a lot of information coming at us, so I'll just keep writing questions in the margin. But I'm so sorry. I missed your name and what entity you're representing. Do you mind introducing yourself again? Thank you.
Yep, of course. Alex Hassel with the League of Minnesota Cities.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mr. Tolbert?
So just to follow up on how you phrased that, you said we're not obligated to give any more licenses. So is 25 in Ramsey County the floor, and the city and county has the option to go higher, or is it both? Is it a maximum and a minimum?
So I think it might be easier to think through an example of maybe a smaller county. So say you have a county that's under 25,000 in population. They would only be obligated as an entire county to accept one registration. Those cities within that county likely have a population under that threshold too, of course. And those individual cities have their individual limits of one per every 12,500. But if the county were to, basically once one registration in that county was issued, that would meet the county's threshold, so none of the cities would be obligated to actually reach their threshold of one, if that makes sense. So once the county reaches their threshold by population, you're still authorized to provide more registrations if you would like to. And same on the county's part outside of your city jurisdiction as well, if they chose to authorize more as well.
So just to clarify, in St. Paul, is 25 the number based on population?
Based off of like the census, yeah, we could go up to 25.
Up to, but not beyond 25.
Correct, unless, like, as in like 2030, if we grew for population, then yes, it would grow by the census. But as of right now, we'd be capped at what the census provided in 2020.
Okay, so we're both, so 25 is the floor and the max. So we have to have
Yes.
25.
You would not be able to tell the Office of Cannabis Management to issue less than 25. You would have to accept up to 25. You can then tell them that you are wanting more, so you could say that, or you as a city council could impose a limit at that point where that is now the ceiling. But it is by legislation a floor because you could go above that.
Okay, so if we hit 25, say it's 2027, we already have 25, and we want to add another one, the city council can petition to the board, to the department that's being created, and say we'd like this additional one.
You would be able to change your limit. So by ordinance, you as a city council will be able to put a limit in place, and the Office of Cannabis Management has to respect that limit as long as it's compliant with the limits within statute. So if you reach that limit and you would like to have more, you could raise that limit, and then so long as there were businesses that were applying for licenses in your jurisdiction, you would then be able to get more.
I appreciate the lens of looking at a smaller, less populated county. We're exactly the opposite with St. Paul having 56% of the population of Ramsey County. I guess that ebbs and flows a bit. But I do think there's a question in there from Mr. Peterson, and just generally recognizing this is still in front of us, we need to be in coordination with the county as we move forward. I think I shouldn't speak for the suburban cities, but as well as the suburban cities that have smaller populations. And so hopefully that's something that's part of our plan. Ms. Jalali had a follow-up as well.
So if we're using this like 25 number, is that 25 of any kind of license? Like that could be, 2 licensed cannabis retailers, 17 micro businesses, and whatever the rest mezzo? Or is it like there's, for each of those types of licenses, a specific allotment? Like, is it, and I'm asking because it just really strikes me that there will be a lot of interest in something like the micro business model. A lot of people will not be able to start a whole brick and mortar location. The demand, like 25 doesn't seem to make sense for what. So how does that work? Like, how does it break out by business type?
So the license limit applies to retailers, micro businesses, and mezzo businesses, and that number encompasses all of them. So it's not 25 per each of those license types. But it also does not include lower potency licenses, so the current edible cannabinoid products would not be included within the limits.
Okay, I think obviously we're brand new in figuring this out as a state, but it just strikes me that there will be a lot of complexity to figure out, like if a business is operating mainly as like marijuana products versus now we can also sell, like there's just a lot of ways I could see that penciling out. So I would appreciate just staying in communication as we figure out what this means for our community. And also, I know that they're creating the Office of Cannabis Management, but is there a place set up where we as a city can officially get our questions to the state office to ask for things like this? Or is that still being, I know that they were hiring as of a few weeks ago, but like, does the state have infrastructure yet so that we can just take all of our questions to them?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about where the state is at in terms of where they are. Right now, the Department of Agriculture, they have a set of staff people dedicated to basically creating the Office of Cannabis Management and setting up the rulemaking process, which will take place primarily over next year. So at this point in time, the Department of Agriculture staff are probably the ones best to communicate with on those, but they are hiring the director of the Office of Cannabis Management. The posting closed, I believe, Monday. So I believe their intention is over the next couple weeks to have that appointment made and then more formal communication channels established sometime this fall.
And if I'm understanding correctly, selling is not legal yet. So rulemaking, determining selling and the mechanics of licensing, et cetera, all of our questions, it just strikes me that the questions that we're asking would be useful to aggregate and develop some clear city rule comment and or questions for answering so that once we get to when selling is legal, it reflects on the front end what we believe would be best for our residents. So I'm just thinking out loud at the table as we kind of feel our way through this, but I appreciate understanding where that's at. That is very helpful. All right.
And I'm just appreciating, as a council, we have that convening role and opportunity to convene and ask those questions in advance of the final rule setting. As we get past this first big step, which was use, and then on to sales, which would be upcoming, and so there's an opportunity for us to take an active role in what that looks like. Ms. Prince.
I reading ahead here, the law does allow for a municipal dispensary. So where are things in terms of these numbers? Would a municipal dispensary be one of the 25, or, is it intended that that municipal dispensary would serve 12,500, or could we potentially serve more of the city through a municipal
Yeah, so
retail?
Councilmember Prince, the municipality would be eligible, and it would be one of the 25 that we would go to the limit. And so you would have to make that, the city would have to make that determination if they would only want one, would they want more than one municipality run, would they want all 25 of them to be municipality? That would be all determinations that the city would have to make once licensing is going through the process.
One other question I have, and obviously this is getting way ahead of ourselves, but to Ms. Jalali's point, there will likely be, because I think all of our offices are getting calls about this, there will likely be a huge amount of interest in businesses that would like to be able to retail cannabis. And so one of the things we definitely need to be thinking about is how we rank and rate, and, you know, is it first come, first serve? How are we going to do these things? And it would probably be good for us to start thinking about that sooner than later.
Absolutely.
Great. As predicted, we knew that we were going to end up talking about what's in front of us and
No,
like way in the
that's okay.
future, but appreciate the, and also just having, when more questions may pop up, but just having the resource of the League of Minnesota Cities here, Ms. Hassel, just knowing how hands-on you've been through this whole process, and as, you know, a strong partner for the city, it's really great to have you here and answering some of the tough ones. Ms. Jalali.
Can I ask one question before we move on from this page? Or it's more like a request, but I'm getting lots of questions from constituents about like where they can smoke. And so there's the state law, then there's our city policies, and I just don't know where this lives on our city's website, but it would be really useful in the policy reality we're currently in to just have a simple, understandable, like where are the rules, what can you do, and what that comes from. So like state law says this, and so we follow that. Additionally, city rule says this, also follow that, so that it's just really clear to residents, like, what is the truth right now? Like, that would be a great thing to have in a public-facing, simple, digestible way. And I've personally only, like, just seen different news articles, like, explaining it, and it's not particularly easy to understand. And so if that doesn't exist already, I would love if we could just create that, and it can even be a simple visual thing. But I just think that would help everyone follow the rules right now and just, you know, do what we know is lawful while we explore these other questions. So
Absolutely.
that would be great.
I just wanted to flag, so on page 4, those 3 locations that you see where you're getting questions from constituents on where cannabis products can and cannot be consumed, that is what the law was written. And on page 5, I think that's more of what I'm here is to let you know of what our current city policies are of where you can and cannot and what's being covered, and for you all to consider if that's something that you want to adopt in the future.
Well, and I think it'd be fair to say that, I mean, at the base, that the ordinance that prohibits tobacco on city property, the intention is likely for smoking, not what you're smoking, but smoking. And so I do want to make sure, like I see the last thing says that changes to rules at parks and libraries would involve recommendations from the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Library Board. I would hope that that could turn around quickly, because I agree with Ms. Jalali. It would be helpful if we could get one clear message out to folks, but I can't imagine the benefit of saying, well, right now it's this, but then in 3 weeks it's going to be different. And what I think we want to make sure is that there's not smoke in places where we have prohibited tobacco smoke at a very minimum. And I don't know why we would need to delay in moving forward with that. The other questions I think are deeper and could use some thought from those commissions.
Yeah, as we see, there's things that say smoking in ordinances, and there's some that say tobacco. And so just cleaning up that legislation of what that means, because inhaling smoke and what that could be for secondhand and where that would all be is what we're hoping to accomplish here with you all this month here. So
Right. These are shared spaces, and we want to make sure people can
Yeah.
enjoy them in the way that they have become accustomed, but I recognize that there's kind of two pieces there. So, but as soon as, I think you're hearing from all of us, what we want to do is answer the questions clearly and communicate clearly to our community members. And also, I think it was Mr. Tolbert who was mentioning, if we're clear, then if, a young rec leader needs to tell somebody, actually, you can't do this here, then they know what the rules are and they can move somebody along to recreate in their own backyard or whatever. Mr. Ballinger.
I was wondering, can an owner have more than one location?
Councilmember and members of the council, so there are limits on the number of licenses a single person, entity, or corporation can own that are named in statute. One thing to know is that one owner, corporation, or entity can only have one retail location in one city. So if they held 5 licenses, they would have to be in 5 separate cities. You couldn't have one owner with 10 different retailers within the city.
So for the county that has,
It applies to county as well, I believe.
okay, but if an owner had a shop, say in St. Paul and then in Falcon Heights, or they could do that?
No, I believe that they can also only have 1 per county as well. I should have clarified that. So I think 1 per city and county. So if they wanted multiple licenses, they would maybe have 1 in Ramsey County, 1 in Hennepin County.
Okay,
I believe also like the Office of Cannabis Management would be looking at and making recommendations to cities if you wanted to approve that license or not, that would be the knowledge that I said, that those 30 days. So if there was 1 in Hennepin County, there would be 1 in, say, Stearns County. Would you want to have a third of that person to have a third in the market? So that would be the decisions of the city trying to decide in that 30-day period. That would be all knowledge that the Office of Cannabis Management would be providing to us. So.
yeah, and I'm gonna look to J-Lar and Jessica. We just talked about this. I think for perspective, we have 25 tobacco licenses in the city of St. Paul currently. 25. So the 41, we have 41 tobacco shops, and those are the specialty shops. So just by perspective, 25 is a significant number addition. It doesn't sound like a lot in a city of 300,000, but 41 is the current number. Okay, thanks.
So I think going on to page 6 then, so that we just kind of talked about the license limits there. And so as Councilmember Prince had noted here, so the cities can have a municipal cannabis retail store. And so it could be 1 or it could be up to our limit of 25 if we wanted to. And so there's still some questions that the league is still looking at with their lawyers about kind of like insurance, liability, financing, banking. The city is also looking just like if we receive federal funding from the feds, like if we had a municipal shop, would we still be eligible to receive those funds through different grants and opportunities that we all do for different projects? So just noting that there's still the ability, and this is unique to Minnesota, not a lot of other states have this opportunity. And so I know that there's some questions about that and some interest at the city level of having that conversation. So I know Alex and the league will be providing that information as soon as we have more information on that. So just talking about taxation, so the products are all going to be at 10% across the board. St. Paul isn't able to impose a tax solely on the sale of taxable cannabis products, so we can't add an additional tax to the products. But the state sales tax and local sales taxes do apply to cannabis and hemp-derived cannabinoid products. The taxes that will be received through the cannabis products are going 80% back to the Office of Cannabis Management, and then 20% of that will go to the local government cannabis aid account. And so cities will receive 50% of that, and that ratio of how that money is allocated is based on how many shops you have. So if you only have 8 shops, you would only receive a portion of that. And so if we hit the 25, that's where we would hit the max amount of the revenue that would be coming in for that year.
But to be clear, and I think this is something that we discussed earlier this week, that the revenue that we receive is based on the number of stores, not the volume of sales. So if we have more stores, we would get more of that distribution, but it's not proportional to the amount that we sell in St. Paul.
That is accurate, Council President.
Okay, Ms. Jalali.
So I'm just checking my understanding. The city cannot do its own cannabis product-specific sales tax. However, state and local sales taxes apply to cannabis products. So it's like we're getting revenue through the sales tax. We just can't do an extra tax on top of that that's like just for cannabis.
That's my correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I see it says revenues from retail sales of cannabis products will be divided. 80% goes to the general fund back to the Office of Cannabis Management, 20% to the local government cannabis aid account. Mm-hmm. So we get 20% of the cannabis sales in the city back to us, or?
It's 50% of the 20%.
Okay, and what's that remaining 10% then? Where's the other half of a 20 going?
So the remaining half of that local fund goes to counties under a little bit differently of a formula. They have part of theirs set aside to be distributed to counties equally and then by proportion to number of cannabis businesses. But for the city portion, it is just number of cannabis businesses. And it's not just...
I just need to back up because I'm just not understanding what you're saying. So the other 10% of the 20%, it goes to the county, or where does it go? Okay.
Counties.
Yep.
Okay. All the counties or Ramsey County, or how does that work?
So their fund is, the county portion is split up a little bit differently. I believe it's 20% of their revenue is distributed equally amongst all 87 counties, and then the remaining portion of the county fund is distributed by county to the amount of cannabis businesses that each county has. So it's distributed based off of like the proportion of how many cannabis businesses one county has versus another. The city portion is just based on the proportion of cannabis businesses that you have.
And like Council President said, not by the sales that you're having. So,
Purely on the number of stores.
correct. Does that answer your question?
So is the remaining 10% going to the counties? Like what? Okay, that's just the one. I was just trying to boil it down to what it is. Okay, thank you. That's it.
So it's the 80% to the Office of Cannabis Management, the other 20%, 10% to cities and their formula, and 10% to the counties following their formula that Ms. Hassel just laid out for you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, we understand.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
I didn't write the law.
Okay.
Do you want to keep? Is there
Sure.
anybody? Okay, perfect. So the revenue cities will receive, and then how that will be paid. So after the Department of Revenue will certify the amount, and each city will by September 1st of 2024, so starting next year, and then if they're up and running, and then each year it'll be paid just like any other aid that we receive, such as like LGA. That's how we receive the payment is December 26th. So that's how that will be paid out to cities and to the city here. And then for the cannabis retail registration fee, the city can impose an initial retail fee of $500 or up to half the amount of the applicable initial license fee charged by the Office of Cannabis Management, whichever is less. And then the city may also charge a renewal retail registration fee of $1,000 or up to half the amount of the applicable renewal license fee charged by the Office of Cannabis Management, whichever is less. Okay. I know there were some questions about just other products and other businesses. So existing THC products and licenses, how does that impact the city's existing license for THC products? So right now, cities, it appears that they can continue to license the edible cannabinoid products until the Office of Cannabis Management begins issuing their license. And so businesses that sell these products to consumers must register with the Department of Health, who's taking over these licenses by October 1st of this year. And then once the Office of Cannabis Management begins issuing the lower potency hemp edible retailer license, cities are likely preempted from continuing to issue their own licenses and would begin registering retailers through the city's cannabis retailer registration process. And then, so the agency, like I said, is in charge is the Department of Health right now for these products. And so I gave you that website there on where folks should be going for businesses in your wards if they have questions about if they're selling those products currently at their businesses. Moving on to page 8 here. What changes have been made to the law that was adopted in 2022 that was for the THC products? So manufacturers must have an even batch of products tested and certified and complied with the standards by MDH. Manufacturers must disclose this information regarding foreign materials applied or added to the products. The labels should contain a batch number. Beverages cannot contain more than 2 servings per container. Edible cannabinoid products may not contain artificially derived or synthetic cannabinoids. Edible cannabinoid products other than beverages must be displayed behind a checkout counter, and retailers must verify the age of the purchaser, which is 21. Edible cannabinoid products must be sold. Products be sold for on-site consumption. Until the Office of Cannabis Management begins issuing license, the on-site consumption of edible products is limited to those businesses with an on-sale liquor license issued under Minnesota Chapter 340A. And additionally, they have to meet the following conditions. They must be served in their original product. They may not be sold to an intoxicated customer. They must not be permitted to mix with other alcoholic beverages, and products removed from packaging must remain on the premises. So after the Office of Cannabis is set up, it will issue on-site consumption endorsements for cannabis license holders. And so how does this impact us right now with existing THC license program? The local THC licenses may continue with until the Office of Cannabis Management begins issuing its own licenses, which state agencies anticipate as of January 2025. And once that begins, cities will need to follow the retail registration procedures outlined in the law. So to that question about where all these other businesses would be, this is where this would kind of fall under the Office of Cannabis Management. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but as I stated about what you,
Just a quick question from Ms. Prince.
Yeah, and we're kind of past this, but I'm just confused about, we can issue a city license for the retailers that we allow to be here, or is it a state license?
Are you asking about current THC, like
No,
cannabinoid products?
for cannabis, for the, not the edibles.
For the actual product?
Yeah.
That would all go through the Office of Cannabis Management. The licensing would go
So
through
they
them.
do the licensing, but then I see here that we can have a $500 fee for registering the business, and that we will be required by the OCM to do compliance checks.
Correct. So for every business that you have in your jurisdiction, they will give you the compliance check, kind of like what we have for safety and inspections here for any business. They would give us the same inspections that the state would have through their office that we would have to comply with.
And how are we paying for that? It's an unfunded mandate.
In essence, yes.
Great. Well, there's a problem.
And that doesn't
So
thread the needle with a potential with the municipal sales instead of doing a full licensing if we're at our capacity and it's in-house. I don't know. It'll be an interesting conversation.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, in any event, it's going to cost us money to do this, and we get 10% of the taxes collected.
I will say, yeah, the 10% to the tax that you're presenting and what we would get for cannabis shops isn't going to equal out to the amount of sales that we will be having in the city. And so I know there's been conversations at this table and around the city that may be looking at potentially changing that to, St. Paul is probably going to be one of the top, I can imagine, top 5 cities in sales if we have that many shops. And so how can we get the best, how can we change that system and formula so that it's impacting us so that we get more of that revenue if we're going to be doing the most amount of inspections based off of stores in the city.
Right.
And also just
And
to keep the cart.
all kinds of enforcement.
Right, but to make sure that the cart's not getting before the horse, or, I think these are really fair questions and things that we need to be weighing into. Ms. Jalali's earlier point, as we're going into this rulemaking and saying to the legislature, hey, thanks for getting this thing passed, but it's going to cost us more to enforce this than we're going to make in the 10%. So we need to figure out how to correct that. And I think that that's part of, I know sometimes you got to do stuff to get it across the finish line, but recognizing all of these things, I mean, this group hears all sorts of tobacco complaints from our compliance checks, and it's time consuming for our legislative hearing officers, it's time consuming for us, the inspectors that are out there. So just recognizing that cost is high. And that proportional split that's not based on sales, but instead based on a number, could be challenging in that way. So I definitely think we need to keep that in the front of our conversation as well, because at a certain point, it seems like we're going to be paying more than we're going to be making.
Well, yeah, especially if we have to do legislative hearings. I mean, this is a tremendous amount of time and energy that we are going to be taking on without being compensated. So, yeah, we got to fix that.
Another reason why I'm for municipal.
Yeah.
Well, can we go through what,
Yeah.
you said you were going to kind of jump through this, what is a crime
Yeah,
now? I
so-
think most importantly, we want to know, what can St. Paul
Yeah.
do now?
So the crime, I'm not going to read this to you, but you can see what would be possession if first, second, third, and fourth degree here, and then what can be while operating a motor vehicle. And as I go to the last page on page 10, just what is it to have possession in a product of a motor vehicle? And then the last thing I just wanted to highlight, as we've been talking about here, is what can we do now? So we continue to research guidance ahead of the Office of Cannabis Management determining their licensing and rulemaking. like I said, no license can be issued until the state says, which makes moratoriums somewhat redundant. I know there's been conversations in the public eye and the media about moratoriums. And so unless the state somehow is ahead of their January 2025 schedule, I would recommend to this council to not do a moratorium at this point. I still think the more work we can do right now while the rulemaking and that such is still happening and what we can do at the city is important. So I would not recommend that. And then just continuing reviewing our city use ordinances, like you all stated earlier about like what is our universal statement around parks, libraries, overall in the city of what you can and cannot use the product and where. And so where the city can look at for public places and statute and define what public place is in that ordinance. So if that's outside of libraries and parks, on sidewalks from certain distances of businesses, child care centers, et cetera. So I just wanted to highlight that as we're looking at that this month here in August, and then just consider where outdoor smoking is otherwise allowed and trying to mirror what that would be for cannabis, because we don't want to penalize cannabis as we have been working with tobacco, and so we'd want to, as we enforce tobacco, we'd want to enforce cannabis in the same mindset. So I just wanted to flag those for the city council here. So,
All right, Ms. Jalali.
This might not be something you can answer, but what is the difference between like possession of cannabis in the first, second, third, or fourth degree? Like, how is possession not just possession? Why are there degrees? And like, what does that actually mean?
I believe it's more than the amount of that you have in your possession, but I guess
So like the first degree is certain amount, second degree, okay. I'm sorry, I know you were gonna step up and say something. So it is about amount. It's just a tier based on how much of it you have, okay.
So if you have more than 2 pounds on you, and then you have less than, I think it's a pound, well, what is it? But no more than 10 kilograms. So 2 pounds to 10 kilograms, you'd be in that first degree. And then if you have more than that, then it goes to the second tier and as you increase. So
Thank you for explaining that.
yeah.
Ms. Prince, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I believe that as part of the passage of this law, that we were also going to be expunging records, and is that anything you can speak to?
Yeah, so on page 1, I kind of touched base on that, but expungement procedures are going through the Department of Public Safety, and so they started yesterday going through the expungements. So those would be going through that. I can't speak to the amount of people. I don't know if you know that number off the top of your head that would be in Minnesota, but we could find that for you if you're interested. But
And the only other thing I want to mention, which isn't directly germane to this conversation now, but it's one that I think we've all thought about, which is one of the most important things about passing this law and decriminalization of cannabis is the recognition that the war on drugs for however many 50 years resulted in discriminatory enforcement of African American people and people of color. And that I had come to believe that we were going to be able to collect taxes that would actually pay to cover the cost of making cannabis legal and licensing and enforcement and so forth, which apparently we're not even at that point yet. But other cities and states are looking at the ways that the tax proceeds from cannabis can be used on racial justice initiatives. So I just want to get that out there, because this needs to be more than legalizing pot, making the cities pick up the tab on it, and then not having it result in some kind of racial justice action on the part of our state. So I just want to get that into the record at this point.
And maybe just acknowledging that if 80% of the revenues are going to the Office of Cannabis Management, there's a call to action to that office on a statewide level, which we've talked that is really preferable if the state takes the lead in reparations work.
Yeah.
You know, if they're taking the bulk of the resources, then maybe they should take the bulk of the responsibility.
Absolutely. I mean, whether we're able to do anything locally, certainly the state, to your point, is getting 80% of the tax proceeds, and that should result in something more meaningful than covering the costs of doing business.
So if it's okay with you, I know I gave you a lot of information here. Ms. Hassel might have some more information that I might not have covered that she might just want to touch on, and we can still continue the Q&A, but I want to give her maybe an opportunity if she has any more thoughts, or if I said something wrong or something.
I'll be very quick just to not take up too much of your time, but thought I would just share some of the things that we as the league are hearing across the city community, across the state in terms of what they're looking at right now. Public use, of course, is a big topic of mind for everyone. It is a little bit unique how Minnesota enacted this portion of the law. Typically, what we've seen in every other state is pretty clear instruction that public use is not permitted, but this law really left it to local jurisdictions to make that determination. So we know that many cities are looking at their existing smoking ordinances if they have them, seeing if they are broad enough to apply to these products, and then enacting ordinances if they choose. We're also encouraging cities to talk to their counties about this as well. There are some counties that have smoking ordinances as well. I know Ramsey County is one of them. So determining whether or not those ordinances are broad enough and whether or not they apply just to tobacco or if they're written in a way that would apply to these products as well. So that coordination is also something that the league is encouraging. We've also been hearing pretty significantly from cities that there has been attempt of sale. There's a lot of confusion that now that it's legal as of yesterday that sales are legal too, but we know that it's not lawful to sell without a license from the office. So just something to be aware of. And then a lot of cities are also looking at their zoning ordinances and trying to determine how they might want to adjust those for the incoming industry, knowing that they will have the authority to enforce their zoning ordinance for all of these cannabis businesses. So just something to keep in mind that we've been hearing in the community. But happy to answer any questions that you might have too.
Just kind of following back up on what I was saying earlier, thank you to you at League of Minnesota Cities for your leadership in this work. I think it really shows how important having an entity that is able to look at all of the challenges that, you know, a state legislation can put on the laps of cities and working really collaboratively with the cities, but also leading. You did that with COVID as well. I think Director Fisher said that you had a webinar or a Zoom meeting just this week that 536 participants were on. So there's a lot of interest and a lot of confusion, and you've really been shining in terms of helping guide the way through this challenging, important, and I know that we're all excited to do this correctly. But so I just want to acknowledge you publicly for that work, and the League of Minnesota Cities as a partner to the city of St. Paul and the rest of the cities in the state. It's very appreciated. Any other questions for our guests? I would just say, you know, the intent here today was mostly to understand where we stood today in terms of what you can do and what you can't do. Also knowing that there's a ton of work ahead of us before we get to sales, and it's a little, you know, tangled into what happens at the state, and so we do have to kind of cool our heels and see what happens there. We would like to get legislation in front of us that's appropriate to clarify on the smoking, what is smoking versus tobacco. I heard also a call to synchronize our work with the county, and if they have legislation that covers us, great. Well, it's good to know. So I'm looking to our city attorney for that. But follow-up needs to happen swiftly so that we can communicate with one clear voice and people understand what the rules are and what they're not. And I think that we're fairly on the same page, but our legislation is not.
Yes. And as you leave here today, if there's further questions, as it pops in your brain as you're walking away from here today, like let's talk offline later this week or early next week so that we can get this going here. So if there's questions that you had about, and if you have thoughts about where that is on public areas, or if you wanted to call it tobacco, or if you want to call it smoking, or if you have a preference on that verbiage and language, that would be appreciated to know as well. So.
Right, and recognizing that as we move forward, then again, we have a convening space and we can continue to meet as changes are made. I'll just share, I mentioned this to Mr. Peterson, but in terms of confusion, I have a property in my ward that the state owned and is a care facility. People are not allowed to smoke on state property, so they stand in the boulevard and smoke, because that's the city's. So there are kind of weird exceptions to smoking rules that we could also clarify at this time if we revisit these issues. Ms. Jalali had a hand up.
I think, yeah, I welcome that detailed discussion in the coming weeks with our community and the policymakers at this table and the administration. And I think we need to strike a balance between meeting some obvious common sense, intent of the state law, intent of local ordinance clarification points, and then also not recriminalizing something that the entire point of it was to reduce needless, disproportionate enforcement burdens and challenges on our residents who disproportionately end up being people of color. So I think a detailed conversation will help us do that. Let's acknowledge this is the very first one that we've had on August 2nd with a law that went into effect yesterday. So, it brings up a lot of opinions, but we are at the very beginning and I welcome more discussion. So thank you to everyone and for this update. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to be clear in the statement I said earlier too, just anything that says tobacco or smoking, we just want to make sure that this product would be equal to that. Nothing is outweighing one or the other. We want to make sure that this is being treated just as it would be for tobacco use. So just wanted to reiterate that.
To be clear, I don't think there's any quarrel there. That's what the goal would be, I think, clarifying where it says tobacco, that we mean smoking, and not going overboard in any recriminalization. That's not the intent.
Right.
Just want to be clear to our community members and visitors. Sounds like if every state is left to their own devices, it's going to be very confusing. And so if St. Paul is very clear, it makes it easier for people to be in compliance.
And to be clear, the city of St. Paul will have their own rules, and adjacent cities and wherever you would go in the state will have their own different rules too. So it'll be confusing to the average citizen. So
Right.
not to make
Let's
it
lead.
any more confusing, but.
Let's lead. Okay, thank you for being here. We appreciate the staff report. We do not need to vote, but we do appreciate and recognize the report, and we'll continue to work together.
Thank you.
Item 16 is a public hearing at ordinance 23-39, granting the application of 897 LLC to rezone the property at 897 St. Paul Avenue from OS Office Service to T2 Traditional Neighborhood and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, Mr. Tolbert moves to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed, and the ordinance is laid over to August 9th for final adoption. Item 17 is Resolution Public Hearing 23-198, approving the petition of John Dochniak to vacate a public walkway between 825 and 827 Iroquois Avenue.
Ms. Prince is
Yeah.
moving version 2.
I need to move version 2.
All right, and version 2 is a technical change?
Yeah, well, I can tell you, this is a straightforward vacation of a public walkway between 825 and 827 Iroquois Avenue. Several utilities retained their easements after securing, including Verizon, after securing Legistar approvals to get the item on today's agenda. We learned that Verizon no longer needs to retain their easement rights. Therefore, we'd like to amend the resolution by deleting the Verizon condition and move version 2.
All right, so it's just no longer germane.
Right.
All right, so let's start by moving version 2. We'll hold a public hearing, and then we'll vote after we close the public hearing. Ms. Prince moves version 2 as described. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The amendment is approved.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Prince moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed, and the resolution is adopted as amended. Item 18 is Resolution Public Hearing 23-199, approving the application of Irish Fair of Minnesota for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on August 11th, 12th, and 13th at 200 Justice O'Hage Boulevard, Harriet Island Regional Park.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Prince moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed, and the resolution is adopted. Item 19 is Resolution Public Hearing 23-200, amending the financing and spending plans of the Department of Emergency Management budget in the amount of $238,536 for the 2022 Emergency Management Performance American Rescue Plan Act grant to provide assistance for emergency management software.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Mr. Tolbert moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 20 is Resolution Public Hearing 23-202, approving the application of One Simple Plan LLC for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on August 12th at the Minnesota State Capitol Grounds, 75 Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Mr. Ballinger moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 21 is Resolution Public Hearing 23-203, approving the application of Anderson Race Management for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on August 19th at Phelan Park Picnic Pavilion Patio, 1600 Phelan Drive.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Prince moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 22 is Resolution Public Hearing 23-204, approving the application of ELS Construction, Inc. for a sound level variance in order to complete construction debris removal on August 11th and 12th at 2277 Ford Parkway, Petco.
Mr. Tolbert.
Do you want to have the public hearing first, just in case there's someone here?
Oh, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? All right, seeing none, Mr. Tolbert moves to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails. Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, I'm going to deny this application. It's for the entire night, which seemed kind of odd. And our office reached out to the Department of Safety Inspections reached out to the applicant, and it sounds like they don't think they need it, and weren't able to justify why they needed it during the day. So we asked them to show up if they wanted to explain why they needed kind of an extraordinary sound level variance for the entirety of the night, because it's not during normal business hours is not a justifiable reasons for a sound variance throughout the entire night. So I'm going to deny this, and I make that motion.
All right, so there's a motion to deny. This is from, the variance was from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I would support your motion. Any discussion? Mr. Tolbert's motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution fails. Legislative hearing consent agenda items 23 through 42 are before you for your consideration.
Good afternoon, Ms. Mormont.
Good afternoon, Council President Brenmo and council members. There are a couple of agenda items. The first one would be item number 27 and also number 34.
Item 27 is RLH RR 23-7, ordering the rehabilitation or raising or removal of the structures at 901 Fuller Avenue within 15 days after the March 22nd, 2023 City Council public hearing.
Ms. Mormont.
Council President, my recommendation coming into today's public hearing was for the council to order the building removed with no option for its rehabilitation, as no performance deposit has been posted and no code compliance inspection has been applied for. I have been meeting with the attorney representing the mortgage company, and I'm asking now for this to be referred to legislative hearing next Tuesday. Has committed to post the performance deposit. I have committed to add a clause to the resolution which confirms the Department of Safety and Inspection policy to return the performance deposit in the event that the owner pursues demolition of the property, and that's returned if the property is rehabilitated. So we'll get that just clarified, which is existing policy elsewhere. And she has identified, which is really helpful, a representative of the estate today, which we've been working on this property for some 6 months, and that has not happened. And so that is actually really great, both for the institution she represents, but also for the city, and moving forward community interests and seeing this nuisance property addressed. So in light of those quite recent developments, I'm asking for it to be sent back to hearing next Tuesday, August 8th.
Okay. So given that, since you've been talking with a representative, are they here to testify?
If you have any questions, Jessica Zalitas is here to testify. Otherwise,
The recommendation.
we are okay.
Okay. So I don't believe there's questions, but this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to speak, I do have to say that. And if there's not, Mr. Ballinger moves to support the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer, send back to close public hearing, send it back to the legislative hearing on August 8th.
Just refer to legislative hearing.
Just send back to legislative hearing on August 8th. All right. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is referred to the August 8th legislative hearing. Item 34 is RLHRR 23-32, ordering the rehabilitation or raising and removal of the structures at 792 Rose Avenue East within 15 days after the August 2nd City Council public hearing.
Ms. Borman.
Council President Brenman, 792 Rose Avenue East is one of the worst nuisance properties that I've dealt with in quite a while. It has presented a significant problem to the neighborhood, and it has significant police issues, code enforcement issues. Most recently, on an ongoing basis, it has been broken into, squatted in. During the legislative hearing, the first legislative hearing conducted at the end of June, the vacant building supervisor did comment about his concerns that there were break-ins happening into the garage by homeless people, and that was a problem that needed to be attended to presently. And the following day, there was an explosion and the garage burned down. Luckily, no one was hurt. The neighboring garage was damaged. Trees were damaged and ordered removed. Those trees were on that property. Wires needed to be dealt with by XL Energy. The building itself that remains the house is a small house on this parcel. It does have evident structural problems in the basement, some significant cracks in the wall. What I would normally look for at this point in order for me to ask for it to be referred back into legislative hearing would be the posting of a performance deposit, ordering a code compliance inspection report, and in this situation, because of the structural problems, or structural engineering analysis. During the first legislative hearing, I understood from the attorney that one had been ordered and was anticipated within 2 weeks, so that would have been 2 weeks ago. I actually got it in my email this morning. I'm going to be sharing this with the city's structural engineer. I'm not 100% confident in it, as one is when if a cover letter is addressed to the wrong person, you don't necessarily trust the facts that follow. This particular engineering report speaks about the city of Arden Hills. It doesn't make me feel confident about the attention to detail that one looks for from an engineer. All of this being said, those three things have been done by the owner. I did not commit to make a recommendation one way or the other based on those things being done. I am not confident that the current owner has control of the site. I have had the opportunity to brief Councilmember Yang, and there is no code compliance inspection report yet. The application was made just last week. They are expediting it. I expect it will be here next week. And taking that together with the engineering analysis, I think I can give you a better report. And I think that the bank maybe will have better information. I, at this point, do not think the prospects are I don't think that it is necessarily a good candidate for rehabilitation, but I wouldn't rule it out. There are people here to testify today, and there is a good record of testimony from the legislative hearing as well. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I know that's not the traditional format of a report that I would give you, but it's not exactly the typical kind of scenario that we face.
So just to summarize, it sounds like you've got, and you've shared, and we have in our record, lots of concerns and doubts, including an exploded garage and break-ins, questions about control of the site and structural integrity.
Yes.
So, but you did get a bunch of stuff today in your inbox, so perhaps a week. I know Ms. Yang also wants to be present for this final vote, as well as she's also concerned. So it sounds like perhaps in order would be a 1 week layover or 2 week layover. 1 week layover. We want to keep it tight. So give you a chance to look through those documents and also allow the opportunity for Ms. Yang to be present. Okay, so am I summarizing that correctly? Okay, sounds good. So this is a public hearing. If folks have been here before, this is different than our regular, there's an issue and everyone gets 2 minutes to speak. This is on this topic. If there's a representative from the neighborhood who wants to be the spokesperson, we have a 5-minute timer that usually goes to the property owner. So this would be, I'm guessing, in support of the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer. Both, one of each. Okay, so let's hear from both sides, and we have to keep it Evie Stevie, so less is more. If the representative for the property is here, they should go first, procedurally. Welcome.
Good afternoon, council members. Christina Kaluza, attorney with Dykema Gossett on behalf of the property owner, HSBC Bank, and its mortgage servicer, PHH Mortgage Corporation. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all this afternoon. I am in agreement with what was just relayed to you about the current status of the property with respect to the application for a code compliance inspection report has been made. I've been exchanging messages with the building inspector, and I believe he's hoping to be able to get out to actually do the inspection on Monday. I'm not sure how quickly he can turn the inspection report around after that, but I believe that there's been a request to have it expedited, so hopefully we'll have some updated information for the council to consider very shortly. In addition, we have posted the performance bond, and again, this is bank-owned property at this point, so there are financial resources available once a decision is made to either move forward with raising the building or repairing the building. And similarly, once we have a chance to review the structural engineering report together with the code compliance inspection, the bank is also actively soliciting bids to be able to make a determination again about whether or not to move forward with repair or tear down the property. So I think that's all I have for you at this time. I'm welcome to any questions that you may have or any concerns you'd like me to address.
I think just the main thing, because there's been the recommendation or what we're going to be entertaining is the notion of a 1 week layover to have an opportunity to review the most recent documents and give our legislative hearing officer an opportunity to review those before she makes a final recommendation. And it sounds like you're in support of that 1 week layover.
I'm certainly in support of that. I guess the one question I have is once the recommendation is made, will we have an opportunity to review that? And if we disagree or have an objection to that recommendation, to voice that concern before?
We'll keep the public hearing open so you can come back after that conversation happens in the course of the week. And I think it'll really be based on the performance, your performance. So spend the time wisely, and we'll look forward to hearing back. That is, I don't know how my colleagues are going to vote, but I suspect that given that that's a recommendation of the legislative hearing officer and Ms. Ying is not present, that will likely be the outcome.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. We're resetting our timer. If there's anyone who would like to share their perspective, now would be the time. And if you could just start by introducing yourself, and when you're done speaking, sign one of the clipboards on either side of the microphones there, so we can track it in the public record. And just stand between the two mics, and your voice will get picked up.
Okay. Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for having us. My name is Hannah Getacho Cruiser, the Executive Director for Face-to-Face Health and Counseling, adjacent to this property that we're speaking about. And I have my colleague here.
And my name is Darius Hussein. I'm the Executive Director of Face-to-Face Academy.
We have been in collaboration for a number of years. As you may all know, the school is in our building, and we do a wonderful job being there for our young people in the community. And we have a number of concerns. We also have some possible solutions to be a part of this mix here. We'd like to continue to provide services and use the space for extending some of the things that we're doing right now. And I'll let Mr. Darius continue on this.
Thank you very much. One of the reasons why we came to the public hearing a week ago is we wanted the council to be aware that there is a 9 through 12 public charter school. We have our fence here on our property, and we can literally, I could reach my hand and touch the structure that's over there. And we've been dealing with this nuisance property and trying to run school for the most underserved kids in the city of St. Paul. We work with an at-risk population. They are on the verge of dropping out of school. We spend a lot of time, effort, and resources getting them re-engaged into the school experience. So having this property, as described, one of the biggest nuisance properties for somebody who's done this for a really long time, right next to all the issues that have been highlighted here, to have this right next to a place where students are supposed to come to feel safe and to learn, has been a significant deterrent and something that we've had to deal with in our daily lives at the school. Right next to the property is a garden space. And in that garden space, we have a farm-to-table garden there. We have an outdoor classroom that we built because of COVID in our response to the COVID pandemic. And we also have a memorial garden that is in that space. So again, having that contrast between the two spaces is really significant. So twofold here is it is our hope that the council will continue to put the pressure on making sure that there is a positive outcome for this space. So that would be number one. Number two, I think since this has gone on to the attention of the bank and the mortgage company, we do commend them. In the last week, we have seen activity happen there. So I know since they've become aware of what the issue was, and I know they were not aware of everything that was happening, we do see that action, taking place. And we come forward too with we know that this is not owned by the city. We know that this is privately owned, but we do come here with a proposal to help develop the land if the bank decides that the property is going to be raised, or if the council feels that there is no possibility for this house to be rehabilitated. We have no use or interest for it if the house is rehabilitated, but if it is raised, we would be willing to get into negotiation with the bank to turn what has been a blight on the city into something that's extremely positive and can expand programming not only for the school, but the health clinic that has been here in St. Paul, is well known to the community, and has served the most vulnerable youth for the past 40 years. So we come here not just with complaints and to tell our story, but to come here to provide solutions that I think could be beneficial for all parties. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you've heard the intent here will be to send this back to legislative hearing, keep the public hearing open, and it sounds like the pressure is helping make a resolution one way or the other, and it sounds like it really could go one way or the other, and both would be positive at the end of the day, especially with your plans to maybe dive in should it be raised. So thank you for being here, and we look forward to hearing, getting close to a resolution for next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, be sure to sign in. Alrighty. So Ms. Prince would move to keep the hearing open, but lay the matter over for 1 week per legislative hearing officer. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is continued to August 9th.
I'm not aware of anyone else here to testify on a legislative hearing item.
All right, so we are holding a public hearing for items 23 through 42. If you are here for an item between 23 and 42, that is not 27 or 34. This is your public hearing. All right, seeing none, Mr. Ballinger moves to close the public hearings and approve as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the consent agenda is adopted as amended.
Okay, this brings us to the end of our agenda. Does anyone have updates, news, information, things that we need to share before we adjourn? Ms. Jalali.
Just one fast thing, which is that I've mentioned the Little Africa Plaza project multiple times around this council table, and this Sunday, August 6th at 11 a.m. at 678 Snelling Avenue, there will be a groundbreaking for this exciting project and kind of the first phase of the redevelopment. And then from 12 to 9 after that is the Little Africa Festival at Hamlin Park, celebrating the Little Africa Business Corridor and our broader Minnesota African immigrant community. So please check that out this Sunday at Hamlin Park and nearby. Hope to see you there. Thanks.
Anything else? Ms. Prince?
Yes, our former coworker, Commissioner Mai Chang Zhang in Ramsey County, reached out to tell us about a very important effort of the Metropolitan Mosquito Control District, which is that they will go to your door to pick up tires that you're trying to get rid of. Tires in your yard become a significant problem for providing mosquito habitat, and you must be a resident of the county, and there are a number of counties from Anoka, Carver, Dakota, so on and so on. But for our purposes, Ramsey, businesses are not eligible. Tires must be off the rims and easily accessible. The Mosquito Control District will collect car and light truck tires. Requests for more than 50 tires or large tires will be handled on a case-by-case basis. Tires must be collected during the months of May through September, and the Mosquito Control District reserves the right to deny tire pickup requests. So call the Mosquito Control District if you have tires that you need to get rid of. They're very expensive to dispose of otherwise, so this is a really great opportunity for people who may have tires that they've been trying to figure out how to get rid of, to have the state metro district come out and do it for you.
Stop breeding mosquitoes in your tires,
Yes.
please, and we'll come pick them up. I see that there's reporters in the house. It would be good if we could spread the word. That is one of those programs that's probably very few people know about, and so using our social media to help amplify that, I think is really helpful. Tires that aren't picked up by some organization can end up in the river, can end up in our park,
for sure.
can end up dumped out in our alleys. So let's get them picked up by the mosquito folks, and it's doubled down on our investment.
Right, I do put that on your social media. And I have one more item. There will be a pollinator festival on Sunday, August 6th, this Sunday, from 10 to 3 p.m. at Phelan Park. I think we just approved the sound level variance. They'll be having music throughout the day, a bird walk hosted by the Urban Bird Collective, a plant walk hosted by a bunch of people. Plant Walk hosted by Hope Flanagan, Gabby Manoman, and the 2023 Walk and Teepee Indigenous Summer Youth Program participants. It's just a great day of celebrating and learning about pollinators and appreciating nature and enjoying music and food and the whole 9 yards. So this Sunday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Phelan Park Pavilion.
All right, great things to do in the city. If there's nothing else to come before us, we are adjourned.
To you about carbon monoxide and carbon monoxide